Welcome, everybody. My name is David Wood, and it's my pleasure to chair London Futurists. So, Tony Czarnecki, thank you so much for being bold enough to offer some response. Tony, you are the managing director of a think tank, Sustensis, and you have many ideas on using artificial intelligence, using technology generally to improve the caliber of governance. I'll let you explain them by yourselves. I'll let you take over the screen and share anything that you would like. Tony.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you, David, for such a prescriptive presentation on what we need to do, and perhaps more importantly, on highlighting the main points about transhumanism, what transhumanism is about. I would like to begin where you ended, on a practical side, how to win mayoral elections by promoting transhumanism. So let me start with a strategy. First of all, we have to ask ourselves, are we a movement or a party? I have 9 questions here to ponder. Is it a one-city campaign, London 2024, or multiple cities, which may have different dates? Is our candidate or candidates, are they going to be selected, elected, or self-selected? And how and by whom this decision will be made? Should it be a current or a former politician or independent person, one of us? Will we need any politician support? For instance, Tony Blair's Institute, Keir Starmer. By the way, anybody that was listening to the Wednesday's Keir Starmer speech will have noticed how much time and space he devoted to artificial intelligence and technology and science. Amazing, absolutely. Irrespective of what you think about the party. Rory Stewart, a former Conservative minister who was running for London mayor, and who probably would be an asset in such a campaign. Anna Soubry, another Conservative MP, and so on. I'm just only highlighting some MPs. Will we form alliances or will we be going alone? Will we should identify competitors and how to deal with them. That's the nature of politics. Identify the sponsors. Is it companies like John Lewis, Electoral Reform Society, Google and Microsoft? But here's a warning that we have to be careful, because if we select some companies, the opposition or the competitors may or the media, they say, well, these companies have an interest to support us because they can see some profits in the future. Now, what are the resources needed? I would start with the campaign board, which should have a clearly defined roles, such as finance manager, resource manager, public relations, image and communication manager, media coordinator. Then logistics. Where do you need an office? Where to be located? Or perhaps we'll deal with just the virtual office. Financial resources, crowdfunding and sponsors, universities, charities, and so on. IT resources, AI specialists. After all, if we promote AI-related technologies, we should have AI specialists in the campaign. Campaign supporters. I would think that universities are our prime source of such campaign supporters. A-level students, perhaps. Social media that David mentioned in his last slide, how important they are. And access to traditional media, radio, press, and TV. Let me now move into the scope of the campaign. I would split it into 2 areas. The big picture area, explaining, for instance, what transhumanism is, which is very important for the people not to be put away, but too much jargon and unknown terms. For instance, we should communicate it David has his own definition. I'm just giving you something to ponder, that transhumanism prepares societies for adaptation to entirely new lifestyle enabled by advanced technology, something like that. The main point is to make these terms clear and understood by laymen. So we should spend less time on explaining the big picture, but much more time on how we are deliver the policies that are derived from that big picture and identify the clear benefits. For instance, answering the question, how soon, how much, for whom? Like translating one of David's statements, from everyone on the line to everyone empowered. Could be translated into spend 4 days with the family, working 3 days in the office, or transform a dying high street into a multi-purpose, thriving community hub. I think we should spread also the short-term and long-term policies, like the short-term policy, and David mentioned that. And giving an example, an advanced AI assistant in every school by the next election, or in every surgery. And if you do that, we should immediately, for each policy, specify how much it would cost, what are the benefits, what is the implementation date, who will be affected, and David mentioned this as well, the implications, good and bad, because almost every innovation has a downside. So we have to immediately say how we are going to cope with that downside. And then the longer term policies, ones like carbon neutrality by 2030. And believe it or not, this is exactly what Leeds wants to do. And for each such policy, we should also estimate the benefits, timescales, who will be affected, and its implications. Communication will be crucial to electoral success, in my view. And I would emphasize 3 points here. That we need to communicate to the electorate in non-technical terms, use known terms if possible, and repeat the new terms and concepts like transhumanism many, many times, and David has reiterated it as well. And then we should perhaps identify the ways with which we will communicate with our supporters. I'm talking about people that will actively support us, not just vote for us, but during the campaign or over the next 3 years will be somehow engaged with it. So we need to present a clear vision, what we want to achieve, and the benefits that we want to gain. We should offer seminars, recommend books and articles to such people. In my view, the target audience should be universities, climate change supporters, and perhaps NGOs. Now, we should measure our success somehow. So if we want to differ from any other candidates, we have to have very clear success criteria, so that if we win that mayor election, that the next election will be easier to win, because we would say, this is what we promised, this is the success criteria we had, here we are, you can test it. David suggested a flourishing index of social and human progress. I'm not saying that it's not relevant or so, but what I would try to point out that we should use as plain language as possible and as many known terms or concepts as there are in use, because we will be having too many new things and people will perhaps be a little bit disinterested in it. So my suggestion would be to use the existing UN's World Happiness Index, which is this is essentially the same what David is proposing. By the way, UK rank in the World Happiness Index fell from 15 to 17 in 2020. For comparison, Finland has been at the top of that index for 4 years running. All the Scandinavian countries are in the first 10 ranks. So the question is that perhaps we could copy some policies of these countries and cities and embrace them in our manifesto. GDP, I think, might still be used as a comparison, but not as the main one. I would think that measures such as percentage out of poverty or percentage of A-level graduates or increased lifespan may be of more interest. Now, David mentions citizens' assemblies. I am a very strong promoter of it, and well, there is a whole plethora of new terms there, but I'll try not to engage you too much today. Just to emphasize that this is needed for continuous citizens' engagement, and a lot of things is happening. Very briefly, a citizens' assembly is a gathering of up to 200 people for a few weekends, 3-4 weekends. They are all randomly selected, and they arrive at some policies which hopefully the government will implement. One of the best examples is the Irish Citizens' Assembly of 2012, which has immensely changed Ireland in just 2 years. So such an assembly can have profound implications on the quality of our lives. Right now, we have the Conference on the Future of Europe. I doubt that many people have heard about that. That started in May and will continue till March. And it engages MPs from the European Parliament, from the Council and the European Commission, but also crucially 108 randomly selected citizens from all European Union countries. And that is a model that we should be adopting for our city mayors after he has won the election. We should engage supporters, perhaps by an online consensus debating. I don't want to go into the details about that, because this is my penultimate slide, but I'm mentioning it that we can make it a unique debating environment where we can combine measuring the support of proposed policies before the election for building into the manifesto, and perhaps spreading the news in the press and media, how many people, what is the percentage of the population that would support the policies that we are promoting. Sustensis has built a subsidiary website called EuroAgora, which actually underpins the consensus debating. It can be used for debating complex subjects like politics. Currently, EuroAgora is aligned with the Conference on the Future of Europe, one of the 10 themes, which is called democracy. But it can be reset to debate any subject like science, climate change, or mayoral elections. And that's what I would propose. It would also show how national politics and citizens' engagement can be reignited. So how it works, very briefly, you have a statement of the policy, like here, Citizen Assembly is more represented in the electoral system. This is the statement. You can agree, disagree, and or ignore it, saying that I don't know. But crucially, you can also add your own statement or modify the original policy, saying, yes, I would vote for it, provided that this is slightly rephrased. And this is the crucial difference between any polling system known. So what you get after those added modifications, that you arrive at the initial position, how the participants vote or support an initial policy. And after a while, perhaps weeks or even months, you see that the position has changed, and the final position may be like this. So this is the biggest group, and this is a smaller group. So what you want to achieve is a 60% majority. This is my last slide. So the original statement would be voted, say 60% of the votes are needed. People have amended those statements. And as you can see, the majority, at least 60% of the participants supported those 4 statements. So if such an approach is used in a mayoral election campaign, it could then be adapted for town hall citizens' assembly. obviously we would need volunteers to manage the debates and IT, AI to manage the website. All the details are on the Agora website. I think it will be in the chat. If not, then I'll do it right now. And I'll email you my email address in the chat. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Tony. Lots of very important, good questions there, many practical questions there too. Now, I'm open to inviting more people in a minute to offer probably shorter comments than Tony has made. Tony has a chance to think through. And you can raise your hand in the panel if you wish, or you can ask some questions. But for the time being, I want to offer at least some responses to some of Tony's questions. Now, if I was a traditional politician, I would want to give the impression that, hey, I had good answers ready for all these questions. No need to worry about it. Everything's well thought through. It's all fully costed. I'm not such a politician. I have to say that I have thought about some of these issues and I have tentative answers. And it's still early days. And this will only work if there are a whole bunch of people who are able to provide complementary skills, and we can do this together. In terms of this being a single city campaign or multiple cities, well, it's as much as the movement as a whole is able to inspire. Each separate city will require extra costs, extra resources. If there is a method found that can raise funds, such as crowdfunding, as has been mentioned, if there are sponsors who can come forward, whose money can be accepted without in some ways damaging or risking the integrity of the campaign, if that can happen in one city, somebody else in Leeds may say, hey, I'll be happy to fund at least some of the campaign in Leeds. So that can scale up to the extent that there are resources eager to help. And each new city will have its own flavour. There will be some things that are different in Leeds or in Edinburgh than in London, of course, but there should be a lot of reuse. And so the more people that get involved, in some sense, there will be benefits of scale. Would we be open to an ex-politician or a current politician being nominated? Well, in principle, yes. If Rory Stewart or David Miliband or Anna Soubry goes away on holiday and reads my book, Vital Foresight, or watches some of the online material about transhumanism and says, you know what, this makes a lot of sense. I would like to spend the next part of my life promoting these ideas. Then we are not going to chase them away at all. We will be very keen on their connections, their skills, their existing proficiency. So there are no decisions at all about candidates, or even decisions about how candidates will be chosen. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm open to suggestions as to how this should be done. Of course, I will want, as the longest term co-founder and treasurer as the Transhumanist UK, I will want to maintain some monitoring of this. I would not want somebody to come in who had actually quite different personal desires, and they would take the campaign off in an alien direction, although first implying that they were interested. And in terms of how can we be organized to compete against well-oiled party machines? Well, I don't think we can be well enough organized to win in 2024. That's too much of an ask. But I do again point to many of the runners-up in the 2021 election. I pointed to the fifth candidate who had 2%. The votes go down a lot less than that. But there are many in between who were small groups of people who managed to get a lot of online support. So we would be looking to use our online skills. We would be looking indeed to take advantage of people with social media skills, with marketing prowess, and with access to some of the traditional media as well. I've been advised that many in the traditional media would be interested, at least on a one-off basis, in looking at some of the, quote, interesting alternative candidates, and that would be our chance to do well enough in such an event to be invited back at least an extent. So these are some of my answers. Tony, what else should I look at whilst I look around to see if anybody else is bold enough to want to come on stage?
David, may I just comment very briefly on your last point, organization? Can we do it? The answer is, look at Macron, what he did in just 10 months, coming almost from nowhere to winning the presidential election in France with just one statement en marche. He ignited, first of all, the younger people, and he won the presidency. He couldn't win traditional seats in the regional elections, but he did it on a national scale. Obama did exactly the same. He said, we can do it. And he gained $710 million just by subscriptions and by social media campaign. So I think we have some examples to follow, and I think it is perfectly doable.
So there are lessons we can learn from both Obama and Trump and Macron. Macron, of course, had the advantage of being a well-known French politician before. He had been the finance minister under the previous president, if I remember right. So, and he knew how the levers of power worked, and he was not representing things that would be seen as too much of an outsider. He was reformulating some of the mainstream of the French political discussion. I don't want to diminish his accomplishments. It was remarkable, but he had an advantage we don't yet have. Obama was an outsider in many ways too, but he was a candidate for one of the main parties. So that was his advantage. And likewise for Trump, he became the candidate for one of the main parties. I don't think that's within our grasp. But I mean, the alternative way in which we are successful will be if other parties pick up our ideas and run with them. So I might say in 2024, well, we didn't do well in terms of the number of votes, but look, these other parties have taken many of our key ideas. They are talking much more seriously about solving health issues by, first of all, addressing aging. They're accelerating neurotechnologies for better emotional states and mental health. And they're doing all these other things as well. So that would be a success too. But I don't think we can rely on that happening unless we are also part of the discussion, putting things forwards. I don't think the other parties would have adopted so many green policies in the UK unless there had been a Green Party that was taking at least some votes away, especially in the EU elections when in, I think, 2015, was it? They did pretty well. Maybe I've got the dates wrong, but the last but one, they did, one of the last elections, they did well. So I'm still waiting for people who are bold enough to join us on stage. Otherwise, I'll read out some of the questions or comments that have been asked. Tony, any more feedback?
Well, I think perhaps we should talk about the organizing this board, campaign board. I'm pretty open-minded how it should be done, but I think there should be a team that will be managing the campaign. Perhaps managing the board is too grandiose term, but we need a team of people that will be engaged almost day by day in the very few months before the elections and to some extent over the next 3 years to make this campaign successful. So perhaps we should achieve, at least by the end of this meeting, that there will be some people volunteering to join that, let's say, virtual team for the time being.
So we have a National Executive Committee for Transhumanist UK, but it's moribund, I have to say. There are a number of people who were quite active in the past, but because nothing much was happening, that we haven't met for a long time, and some people may no longer be interested, others may join us. But that's only a very small starting point, and I do share your view that we need to invite new people to come on board without necessarily making a long-term commitment. And some of the mechanisms you've suggested, some online discussions, would be a good vehicle for that to happen. So my success criteria for this event is that there's enough interest expressed, either by people live in the discussion now or by people watching the recording on YouTube, which would be an order of magnitude more, maybe 2 or 3 orders of magnitude more in due course. In that case, some of them committing to at least explore together more seriously will be a step forwards in the meantime.